Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Budding Solutions, a series on disease and pest management in cannabis sativa. My name is Kim Leonberger, and I'm an Extension Associate in the Plant Pathology Department at the University of Kentucky. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at hemp greenhouse pests. To discuss these important insect issues, I would like to introduce Dr. Jonathan Larson. Jonathan is an extension entomologist for the University of Kentucky. He teaches about integrated pest management in a variety of cropping systems, such as trees and ornamentals, as well as high tunnels and greenhouses. Jonathan is going to share a few slides with us about this topic, and then we'll have time for a few questions. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to chat with folks about some common greenhouse pests. I do work with greenhouses occasionally here in Kentucky, and I am excited to talk a little bit about some of the pests that show up there. What we're going to talk about is just some of the different ones that pop up most frequently here in the Kentucky greenhouses and high tunnels, whichever you prefer to talk more about. But these are things that are fairly common, kind of the big bads, the rogues gallery that we see in this system. When we talk about these kind of controlled interior scapes, these offer a pretty special challenge in terms of controlling pests. Pests in the field are optimized to be successful thanks to their shorter life cycles compared to things like beneficial organisms. They also are able to reproduce more quickly than some of those things. And all of that adds up to this really quick buildup and destruction that can occur in the field. And that can be even more optimized in these protected environments. We have these monocultures that are there for their feeding. It's all of their favorite food in one spot, and it's in nice and tidy rows. I think that both of these images from inside of a greenhouse are kind of liminal. They look a little freaky to me because it's just so many of the same thing over and over again. But these pests that we're going to talk about look at this and see this Las Vegas style buffet that they're able to mow through and eat whatever they want, and there's hardly anything there to stop them. All of the things that we use to make the greenhouse or the high tunnel hospitable for plants also help these particular kinds of pest organisms. There's consistent heat, there's consistent humidity, there's protection from the elements. All of that leads to a rapid buildup, possibly of different pests, and a quick recovery from things like insecticide applications. When we look inside of these different interior scapes, we may spray for these different organisms. Most people are going to turn to this as kind of their first line of defense, despite some of our teachings about integrated pest management and things like that, and considering alternative options. This is the kind of quickest and easiest way to manage things. That can be a little different with hemp, of course, but it's important to note that when you treat in the field, there are so many other variables at play that if we do have insects that start to display resistance to different insecticides, that there's often something else that's going to kill them and kind of eliminate that mutation and cut down on resistance issues. But inside of a greenhouse, that's not as true. So we do see more resistance problems pop up in greenhouses because we're creating this protected environment that may foster the mutant population and allow them to pass those mutated genes or mutated adaptations on to the next generation, leading to the lack of efficacy from specific products. So really, when we talk about greenhouses, as you've no doubt heard from everybody that's got an entomology after their name, or plant pathologist or anything else, we want to go about this in an integrated way. We want to think about methods of monitoring, of preventing these pests from showing up. We want to establish some thresholds that then, after those thresholds are met, we implement some sort of suppression program. We're doing something to try and minimize the population. So all of this is built around this idea of being proactive rather than reactive is the hope. So I wanted to talk specifically about a few different insects that I know will be important if you're growing in a greenhouse. And the first one that often comes up in conversation are fungus gnats. These are extremely common in containers and they're common in protected areas. I generally speak with a lot of people who are dealing with fungus gnats in their house plants. But if I step kind of outside of the homeowner market, these are something that the high tunnel and greenhouse growers often find and are often concerned with. So when we look at these two images, you're seeing adults. The adults kind of resemble mosquitoes. They have those long, skinny legs. They have two wings as they are flies. Some differences between them and mosquitoes would be kind of the tapered body as well as the beaded antenna. Most of the fungus gnats people are going to deal with here in Kentucky would be dark-winged fungus gnats, and you can kind of see that their wings have this smoky appearance. They look like they've got a little bit of makeup on there. So they're a specific looking kind of adult. Their immatures are also pretty interesting looking. So they're maggots, since they're baby flies, and the maggots of fungus gnats feed in the soil. In nature, kind of in their natural habitat, they would be feeding just on fungi that are growing down in the soil, anywhere in kind of a moist, damp, low-lying area. But once they get into a greenhouse, they're going to find moisture in abundance, and they're also going to be other things to feed on. So sometimes they'll switch from feeding on that fungus that they find naturally to feeding on things like small seedlings in the roots of newly transplanted plants. These particular maggots, they look kind of slimy. They generally have kind of a creamy white color, dark black head capsule. Interestingly, some people will see a specific species in the greenhouse that they'll come out as groups and they may travel in this kind of glob. And when they do that, they look like a big slimy snake. And it's an attempt to scare away potential predators. When controlling these, it starts with moisture control. We can spray for them. They are a problem. They can get into different tunnels or greenhouses pretty quickly because they're able to fly around a little bit. So you want to monitor for them. That can be done with yellow sticky traps. It can also be done on the soil with potato wedges. If you just take a potato and slice it into discs, maybe if you want to do wedges, it depends on what kind of French fries you would want to cook later, maybe. But you can slice that up and then set the potato slice or wedge on top of the soil. And as long as you come back and check that every day and maybe replace it every couple of days, you'll be able to see where the maggots are. They'll go to the potato preferentially and start to feed. And as you lift it up, you'll see their little heads plugged in there. We can control the adults with contact insecticides, but that's really not getting to the kind of root of the problem, unfortunately. If you don't manage the soil and dry it out and kill the larva, or if you don't treat for the larva, you're going to just keep having these flushes of adults that you're going to keep spraying with contact insecticides like bifenthrin or these various greenhouse bug bombs that you might see. So I would dry the soil out, aim some fans down there, reduce irrigation for a week or two. That'll wipe out a lot of the larvae. It'll prevent the adults that are around from laying their eggs. And then you can also treat with things like Natural, which is a BT type product. You can also use mosquito dunks. Those are labeled for use against the fungus gnats. So these will attack the larval stage and kill it. And that would be an organic and very effective way of dealing with these. I know you're also going to hear about aphids from somebody else, but I've heard that that's more of a field perspective. So I wanted to throw out some of the things that we see in a greenhouse. We have lots of different species of aphids that can pop up in a greenhouse. With hemp, of course, the cannabis aphid is going to be the most likely candidate that you're going to find. All the aphids share a few biological traits, a few anatomical traits. They have needle-like mouths, which you see on the left, and then they also have cornicles. Cornicles are these sort of hot rod tailpipes that stick off the rear end of the aphid. They're a part of their defensive capabilities. They can exude some pheromones from there that will alarm the other aphids and kind of scare them away, hopefully preventing predation. They can reproduce quite quickly. When they're in a greenhouse, most often what we see are asexual reproductive populations that are mainly female. There are times where winged aphids will fly into a greenhouse or a high tunnel, and in those winged populations, you will see males and females. But after a while, it switches almost to this entirely female, sort of asexual colony, where the female is just cloning herself and giving birth to young, like you see here. And then all of her daughters, which are exact genetic copies of her, they are going to start feeding and then growing up really quickly and then doing the same thing. So aphid populations tend to go from 0 to 60 very quickly. You go from no problem to a big problem very fast. Aphids not only feed on the plant and cause kind of gnarled and yellowed leaves, but they can also transmit plant viruses as they feed, since they're feeding on what is analogous to kind of the plant's blood. The big thing that we notice with aphids tends to be their fecal material, which we call honeydew. In a greenhouse, honeydew is most often obvious on leaves or on the table that the plants are sitting on. And then you can look above those leaves or at the plant above that spot on the table, and you'll usually find the pocket where the aphids are hanging out. Honeydew that leaks out of them, this is the result of their feeding process. They're sucking all of the sugar water out. They digest it. They're constantly drinking it up because it's not very nutritious. And so they're kind of constantly going to the bathroom as well. And it leaves this mess. It can collect their old exoskeletons and bits of them. And so it often makes the plant look kind of dusty and wet, and it will feel very sticky. Aphids are one of those things that has actually a really robust biological control industry behind it. You can purchase a bunch of different types of things in a greenhouse to release for aphid control, and you can do this slightly preventively. You don't want to just go out and buy things like aphid wasps, which we see on the left here, and start releasing them willy-nilly. That could be a waste of money. It would be best to know that you have at least the start of an aphid problem, so monitoring for them, putting up some sticky cards, doing plant inspections. But you can get them out early enough that they'll really reduce that population and keep it from booming, and therefore sort of keeping problems at a minimum. They're probably not going to eliminate your issue. Most natural predators and parasitoids, like we see on the left, they're not going to fully kill out the host or the prey that they are attacking. They're going to keep it at a level that's much more acceptable to us. If you aren't interested in biological control, or if it doesn't fit into your budget, you can use insecticidal soap and neem oil as an option for aphids in the greenhouse. Those would be organic. And then pyrethroids can also help. For hemp, it might not be as kind of on the table, but there are other plants that you may be growing that systemic soil applications of imidacloprid or other neonicotinoids can be helpful for. So those are just a few smatterings of options for aphids. I also wanted to throw out thrips. Thrips are one of the more important greenhouse pests. They're a very strange group of insects. They're quite tiny. They're about 1/25th of an inch, which is painful for me to say. I would rather use metrics, but 1/25th of an inch is about how long they get. They're kind of pencil shaped. They can go through an entire generation in about a week. That's a really rapid ability to build up. We have many different species of thrips that we deal with. Just some sort of hallmark ones on the left there would be the tobacco thrips, Western flower thrips, and Eastern flower thrips. One of the things you'll notice about them is an anatomical feature that gives them their group name as the Thysanoptera. They have fringed wings. Their wings look kind of like Davy Crockett's jacket. They've got all these hairs kind of exuding off the edge. Thrips also have strange eyeballs. If we were to zoom in on their head, we would notice that their eyeballs are kind of dimpled, but made up of all these different little orbs. And then they have a strange mouth as well. Most insects have symmetrical mouths that both sides match. So they're chewing on both sides, there's big teeth on both sides, or it's a big long tube that they plug into the plant. Thrips have asymmetrical mouth parts. Half of their mouth is designed to slice at things, and then half of their mouth is designed to be this tube that kind of slurps at things. So they're cutting into stuff, slurping the juices up, and it creates diagnostic damage like we see here on the left in the center image, where they create flecking. They're cutting into the plant leaf or the flower petal, and then as they do that, they drink those juices up, and it leaves behind this kind of blank spot. So silver flecking throughout the plant, coupled with black fecal material. You didn't know you were going to hear so much about insect poop as part of this webinar, but that's kind of one of the big diagnostic things that we use is the fecal material that they leave behind. Thrips are distinct in that it looks like somebody has dipped a toothbrush in motor oil and then kind of went and flipped that onto the plant. You'll see all these little black dots near the damage that we're talking about. They're also very talented at picking up certain diseases and spreading them via the method that they feed on the plant. They can be managed through a variety of things. You can try to prevent their entry through sanitation, washing new plants, new transplants off, excluding infested plants, so taking them out and treating them elsewhere or quarantining them somewhere. And then also avoiding certain colored clothes. Thrips love the color blue, but they'll also fly to white and yellow. People who wear these colors attract thrips inside of greenhouses, and then they can actually become kind of thrips Mary, play on typhoid Mary, where they're moving the thrips from one zone to another or one greenhouse to another. So choose other colors. Red, insects can't see red, orange, those kinds of things would be helpful if you're entering a thrips infestation. They can also be managed through a variety of biological control products. One of the big ones I like to toss out is one that most people don't consider, which would be Bavaria bassiana. This is a fungal pathogen. So instead of worrying about fungi as a problem for your plant, we're weaponizing this insect-specific fungi, and we spray it. And then as it gets coated on the leaves, the insects will crawl through these spores and then get infested. You can see the result of that on the left. This thrips is being turned into kind of a fungal mummy as a result of the Bavaria bassiana. This works on a variety of insects, but thrips is one of the kind of highlight ones that we see in the greenhouse area. Spinosad is another great organic option, and it's in fact probably the premier choice for thrips control. Spinosad is sold at big box stores and garden centers. It's organic, so it's one of those things that does fit really well with hemp production as well. Neem and insecticidal soaps can suppress thrips, but probably aren't going to eliminate them. If you're open to more synthetic products, there's abamectin, bifenthrin, and acephate. Those are some things that you can get, usually without a pesticide applicator license. As long as it's labeled for a greenhouse, it can be used in the greenhouse. You have to check for the plant that you're treating as well. If it's labeled for greenhouse control, it's also labeled for high tunnels if you're doing that instead. And I will end with whiteflies. Whiteflies are another sucking pest. We see a lot of these kinds of insects in the greenhouse. These sucking pests are optimized for that kind of environment. With whiteflies, we see plant stunting. We see that they vector viruses, they move viruses from one plant to another, and then they also produce honeydew. They live under leaves. They develop over the course of about 1 month. They have a sedentary immature stage, so they're kind of like a scale insect. You can see them scattered around the adults in the image on the left. And then they're able to fly as adults, and we actually see how they get their name. They fly, they have white wings, so we call them whiteflies because entomologists are very boring like that. When we look in high tunnels and greenhouses, there's a couple of different species of importance. I selected greenhouse whitefly. This is mentioned in multiple hemp publications that I've read across the country, but then also silverleaf whitefly. When we look at greenhouse whitefly, the way that we identify the adults, the wings are held flat on the body and it forms a triangular shape. Whereas with the silverleaf whitefly, the wings are held at an angle, so sort of like the sides of a tent. And then there is a gap, a distinct gap between the wings when they become an adult. The immatures in both cases are very scale-like with kind of red eyes and greenish bodies, not very distinct from one another. Suffice to say, it's important to be able to find the adults as well. One of the management methods that we can use for these includes sanitation. So when we see that we're dealing with whiteflies, if we start to see this immature buildup kind of on the leaves or on the stems, we can eliminate those plants. We can try to wipe them down. If you just have a few, you can clean a tunnel or a greenhouse out, leaving it fallow for a little bit after a whitefly infestation. And if you do that, the population will be altered and then hopefully be suppressed to a point where it's not going to cause issues. They can be monitored for using yellow sticky cards as well. There is a biocontrol industry around these insects in addition to the other ones that I've mentioned. I wanted to throw out that there's a type of lady beetle which looks different than other lady beetles. It's black with this kind of orange head. Their scientific name is Delphastus. You can find them at Rincon, Vitova, Arbico, and a few other places. And they'll crawl through and eat up a lot of those immature whiteflies that we see here. And then a wasp that is stingless to us, but is capable of stinging whiteflies and laying their eggs. There are a couple of different species that we could use. One of the more common ones would be Encarsia formosa. So Encarsia, just in any of the catalogs or websites for those different biocontrol groups, that would be an easy way to find that. They also set those up by pest most frequently. So if you know what pest you're dealing with, you're going to be able to figure out which biocontrol agents you want to pick from because you'll click on whitefly and it'll give you a list of 10 or 12 different things. And you can find the one that fits your budget or the one that sort of fits your growing situation the best. I appreciate the opportunity to talk just a little bit, just a smattering about the Rogues Gallery and greenhouses. I know it was kind of a quick hit, but hopefully there was some information that's helpful to all of you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was really informative, and it was really interesting to see the variety of different insect issues that could occur in these controlled environments. So just a couple of questions for you. You talked a lot about the biology behind these different organisms. Why is that important when we start thinking about management decisions?
Biology is the basis on which all management is dictated. So you have to know when the pest is around. You have to know when it's at its weakest point. I think it's Sun Tzu that said, to defeat your enemy, you must know your enemy. So you have to be able to understand when the insect is going to be the easiest to control, whether that's through biological control or any of these other management methods. We can only really be successful with that if we know how it develops, when it's present, the speed through which it develops, and then its feeding style as well. Once you have that information, you're able to make better choices in terms of management.
Excellent. And building on that idea of cultural practices as well as biological controls, how effective are those when we compare them to traditional insecticides?
Oh, that's a juicy question. So that it's hard because if you're comparing things to insecticides, it's never going to be a fair comparison. Insecticides, miticides, these other types of pesticides, they're very optimized for the type of control that they are marketed for, and they often do provide 90 to 100% control, which makes people feel very safe and satisfied. The truth is, we don't always need that though. And so, if you look at cultural management methods, physical, mechanical, biological, all these different things that make up IPM, no, they're probably not going to approach the same percentage of control that you might get with a pesticidal product, but they will suppress populations to a level that they're not causing issues anymore. We're getting them below certain thresholds, and you're doing it in a way that's safe for you, safe for the plant, safe for the consumer. I know that those products that we sell, the pesticides that we sell, are also typically safe, but anything that we can do to make choices that kind of move us away from just automatically spraying, I think are beneficial for everything in the long run. So, no, it's not going to kill everything as well, but you are going to get the level of control that you typically need when you combine these tools.
Excellent. I think that's a really, really important point. Um, you touched on some different methods for monitoring, and the importance of preventative treatment as opposed to reactive treatment. Can you talk about how important that monitoring plays into that preventative role?
Sure. So monitoring is the foundation on which IPM is built. You have to know what the populations look like, and you have to know when they're at their worst, and you have to know what they are. If you just are guessing that you're dealing with aphids because you dealt with aphids last year, but you didn't actually go and look, it might actually be thrips, and you have an entirely different set of management tools that you need to be considering. So it's important to put sticky cards out. It's important to check those sticky cards on a weekly basis. You can get the blue and the yellow ones. If you just want to pick one color, yellow is the better kind of catch-all. It will catch most of them. Blue is a little more specialized for thrips if you deal with those on a more regular basis. It's also good to select certain plants to monitor. So if you have a greenhouse, if you can array it in a grid of sort of lettered rows and numbered columns, you can say, okay, I'm going to check the two of the plants at the center of A1 and B1 and C1, and then every week I'm going to do that, and you'll use those as kind of representatives. So you don't have to check every plant in the greenhouse. Those sticky cards that I mentioned are there to be there when you're not. So they're monitoring even when you're not present. But if you're not doing those things, you're not going to know what's developing in the greenhouse. You're not going to have a good handle, and you're going to be reacting because the population will get bigger, and then the damage will become more obvious, and you won't have had the opportunity to kind of prevent and step in early on in that population.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate you joining us today. Just a note to our viewers that we'll post links in the description for this video to additional resources related to these insect pests. As well as we do want to note that while Jonathan mentioned some specific products in his presentation, this does not confer endorsement of these specific products. If you are not from Kentucky and you're looking for management options, specifically insecticides, please make sure to consult your local extension service for specific recommendations that are appropriate for your state. So thanks again for joining us on this edition of Budding Solutions.